In this video, we are going to discuss another load balancer option we have in Azure is called Application Gateway. So in our last video, we have discussed how to create a load balancer and how to distribute the load, right? So we have more advanced load balancer in Azure, so that is the Application Gateway. So basically, this application gateway supports multiple options like path-based routing, or if you want to host multiple sites, so you can configure multiple site routings. And we have a concept called listeners. So we can configure listeners and we can listen on port number one, and we can redirect it to group of resources. We can listen on port number, another port number, and we can redirect it to another group of resources. Right. So here we are going to talk about this application gateway. So basically, this application gateway is a layer 7 load balancer, and it supports HTTP, HTTPS protocol, and it manages WebSocket requests. And we do have an option to redirect the pools, and we can configure WAF, Web Application Firewall, for this application gateway. All right, so before that, I have a couple of VMs here. So VM1 and VM2. So if you follow previous video, I used same one, but this time what I did, I just changed that BG background color and I just modified this. So I have two Azure VMs. So one is blue web group, and BG I have given in some blue color, and second one is orange web group. So that is in orange. So with the help of this application gateway, I'm going to configure this. So from public, I'm going to use public facing front end. So I'm going to create a public IP address that act as a front end. So then I'm going to create listeners. So whatever the traffic coming on 80, or we can even configure path-based routing, but in this example, I'm going to use uh, based on the port number, I'm going to configure these redirections or request forwards. So whatever the traffic coming on 80, I'm going to send it to a rule group called Orange Rule, and there is a pool called Orange Pool. So within that, I have added a Azure VM. So if I give public IP colon port 80, so I want to redirect it to blue or green, that we can configure, and remaining one we can configure. So in simple, whatever the traffic coming on 80, I want to send it to blue, and what the traffic coming on 8080 or any other port like a 8888, I want to send it to this orange group. All right, this is what I want to configure. I'm going to configure now. So for that, let's navigate to load balancing, and here you can find application gateway. Click on create. So this is similar to that previous load balancer creation. So but couple of additional options we have here. I'm going to select compute RG as a resource group. What is the application gateway name you want to give? I'm going to call this as dev app gateway. I'm going to create it in Central India. And in which tier, if you want, you can go and choose standard or standard V2 and enable auto scaling. If you really want, you can select that. Otherwise, you can select it to no. And backend, it is going to create some instances. I'm going with only one just to save some cost. Availability zones, you want to spread across zone 1, zone 2, you can give. So basically version 2 have these options. If you are going with standard, it won't ask you those things. What is the instance count and all, it will just ask that, you can go with it. So anything is fine for us. And you want to enable HTTP to request, and in what network you want to run this, and in what subnet. So basically, this application gateway required a dedicated subnet. If you don't have a subnet, click on Manage Subnet Configuration. Click on Add Subnet. You give a name. So my gateway subnet. So then what CIDR range you want to give, you give it, leave everything to default and click on Save. I have one subnet here. So it's a 10.0.1.0. I have nothing running here. Right, so I'm going to choose that. Let's, oh, yeah, we need to reconfigure it. Compute RC. So dev app gateway. I'm going with standard. One instance is okay for us. So then I'm selecting our regular virtual network and I'm selecting gateway subnet. Now it's not giving an error. Now click on next. All right, so the front end, so based on what type of application gateway you want to create, public application gateway, private, or you want to redirect both. So I'll prefer to go with the public now. So it definitely required a public IP. So I have one jump. So basically this is a machine. So I cannot use it. I'm going to add new. Click on add new and I'm going to call this as um, app gateway public IP. Then click on OK. So AWS recommend to use a standard SKU for this, but on the go we are creating, right? So it's going to create a basic one. That is absolutely fine. So this is the front end. Then click on backend. Now here we need to add the backend pools. Click on add a backend pool and what is a pool name you want to give and what are the resources you want to add. If you observe this, so now we are going to create this part or this particular part. So the front end configuration is now completed. Right. I'm going to call this as blue pool. And if you want to add Azure VMs now, you can go and add that here itself. Otherwise, you do have an option to add once the pool creation completes also. So let's go and create now. Add a backend pool. So I'm going to select a virtual machine and I'm going to choose this VM1 10.0.0.4. So basically that is a blue group. All right, I'm going to call this as a blue pool and I'm going to add this as a target. Click on add. So fine, you have a blue pool. In similar way, I want to create a orange pool also. Click on add a backend pool. I'm going to call this as a orange pool and I'm going to add a VM. If you want, you can even add um, VM scale set or you can even give IP address. So if you're using hybrid environment, so you can even provide your on-premise VM or if you have communication between multiple cloud platforms like AWS and all, you can provide that IP address also here, but communication is must. I'm going to select virtual machine and I'm going to select VM2. So that is 10.0.0.5. That is nothing but Orange Web Group. All right, click on add. So we created two pools and we have added targets to that pool. Now let's configure the routing rules. So what traffic we are getting and where do we want to route? When do you want to route to this blue pool? When do you want to route to this orange pool? So we can configure that here. Click on add a routing rule. So I'm going to call this as a blue rule. And what is a listener? You want to call this as blue listener. And front end IP is going to be public. And I'm going to basically this public IP listens on port number 80. So then where we need to transfer that backend targets, we can configure it here. So this blue listener, and I'm going to select public. If you want to change the protocol or port number, you can do that here. So then navigate to backend targets. So I'm going to redirect to a backend pool. We already created pool, right? I'm going to select that blue pool and backend settings. So we don't have any pool settings. So click on add new and you can give a name. Um, Default pool settings is a name I'm giving here. And backend port is going to be 80. And if you want to configure like cookies, connection drainings, request timeouts. So you can do that here. Even you can add a host name for this. Click on add. I'm going with all the defaults. So now, if you want to configure path-based routing, you can do that here. So basically, this path-based routing, I'll talk about this. I have taken an image from Microsoft official documentation. I'll talk about that. So click on add a rule group. So I'm going to create another rule. I already created blue rule, right? I'll create one orange rule. So then listener, orange listener. So the front end IP is going to be public. Whatever the traffic coming on, you see here, we already have a routing rule that listens on port number 80. So we cannot have duplicate here. I'm going to give 8080. Now that error disappeared. If you want, you can give 8888. So that is also a commonly used one. We are good with 8080. So this is a listener. So when this front end is listening on this 8080, so then to which uh, target backend target it need to redirect. So that we can go and select. Along with this backend pool, we do have an option called redirection. You can redirect to different URLs and all. We can configure that here. I'm going to select orange pool. So then backend settings, we created default settings, right? I'm going to use that here and no path-based routing, then click on add. So now this front end or IP address will listen on port number 80. So then it is going to redirect to this blue rule and it is going to listen on 8080 and it is going to redirect to this orange rule. So whatever the VMs we added to these rule groups, so that will deliver the web pages. So then click on tags. It is going to take lot of time for this creation. So it is running final validation. Final validation is passed. So then click on create. So now application gateway creation is started. All right, as I told you, this application gateway creation will take around 15 to 20 minutes. Yeah, it takes 15 to 20 minutes. So meanwhile, couple of things here. So when coming to the path-based routing, this application gateway support path-based routing. So whatever the request is coming next to that URL slash image or something, you can send it to one server pool, and if it is the URL is pointing to videos, we can redirect it to another pool of VMs. For example, VMs images we can process easily. So for that, a low configuration VM is also fine, right? But video processing is going to take a lot of time, so you can take high configuration one. So, but how the redirection is managed here, the data routing or the request routing is managed here based on the path you are giving. So based on that path, it will go to that pole. So basically, this feature we don't have for Azure Load Balancer, we have it for application gateway. This is one thing. And second thing here is if you want to configure multi-site for this application gateway, so you can configure whatever the user is trying to access contoso.com. So then this application gateway will listen and it is going to send to Contoso pool. If another user is trying to access fabricam.com, again this application gateway will listen that request and it is going to send it to this pool. So how exactly we are configured that listen on 80 and send it to one pool and listen on 8080 and sending it to another pool. So similarly, we can configure this. All right, these are advantages, and you see this creation is in progress. As I told you, it's going to take a lot of time. So I'm going to stop this video. The continuation I'll continue in next video. All right. Thank you.